Howdy, folks. Today we're talking about creative lighting and how you can improve your own lighting skills with the Dark Lord of studio lighting himself, right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Lutz. And before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are actually not subscribed to this channel. Come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps me get even more cool guests on the show. It's just one click. That's all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, the master of color, the legend of studio lighting, Jake Hicks. Jake, man, good to have you back on the show.
How you doing? Yeah, thank you. I know, yeah, back on. I know it's been a couple of years, few years maybe, but yeah, no, it's good to be back. Thank you.
Yeah, it's crazy. It doesn't seem like that long ago. It's nuts.
It really doesn't. Yeah, I know we were kind of talking before we hit record there, and yeah, I think you said it was like 3 or 4 years. I was like, that's crazy. Yeah,
that's nuts because we were still, I think, at the depth of the pandemic at that point.
We were. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Good times.
So yeah, I know, right? I've introduced you as like the Dark Lord of studio lighting, which is actually not really quite correct because you should be the colorful god of studio lighting gel color. How are things going with you? What have you been up to over the last couple of years since we last spoke?
Yeah, I mean, Dark Lord. Yeah, that's a new one. At least that is a new one. I'll take it. Yeah, it's been good, man. It's been good. The last since we spoke. So definitely when we spoke 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was, I was shooting all flash, right? So strobes, and now I'm pretty much exclusively shooting LEDs. So like you ask about like some of the like what the biggest change since we last spoke. That is undoubtedly the biggest change for me. Yeah, for sure. It's been interesting. It has been interesting. It's not a like for like, changing from flash to strobe, from flash to LED, which is, especially with the work that I do, which is a little bit more involved. The lighting has to be a bit more precise and that sort of thing. It's not just a case of I'll just buy 6 tubes and off I go, which, if you're a cinematographer, you could do very, very well with that, but I need sort of more variety in terms of light shaping and that sort of thing. So it's been interesting, yeah, but it's been fun. Yeah, it's been fun.
That's a really interesting aspect. And I remember, for those of you who are watching or listening to this episode, if you cast your mind back to last week's episode where we went through some predictions for 2025, I read out your response, and you mentioned the sort of the progress or the developments in the world of LED lighting. And to me, that's interesting because what you are historically known for is your amazing color and your gel lighting. And of course, in my mind, that's always been strobes with color gels. But now that you're using LEDs, it makes perfect sense because you can change the color of LEDs to any color you want. Does that really make your work a lot easier, or are there any limitations in that?
So, like I said, it hasn't been like for like. And I think one of the biggest things that I've kind of learned, whilst kind of going through this, I mean, let's just take LED panels as one example, right? Which is what a lot of people, especially earlier on when they were playing with LEDs, were kind of used to. And what an LED panel is, long story short, it is, let's just call it like 500 little lights in a circle or a square, or whatever it is, right? Spread out over let's just say 12-inch by 12-inch, right? But you have essentially now you have 500 little lights as opposed to one big light, which is what a flash typically is, right? Strobe. So many of us, when we're learning photography and how light works, we're kind of brought up on the inverse square law principle, right? Whereas light, drops off proportional to the distance and that sort of thing, yada, yada, yada. But basically meaning that it's a fixed rate. Light drops off at a fixed rate. Now, that principle is based on a single point of light. In reality, it's actually very, very vague. It doesn't really translate specifically to a studio because of bounce light and that sort of thing, but it's a good general rule of thumb, right? Now, what happens when we start to use LED panels, for example, is the inverse square law no longer applies because it's no longer a single point of light, right? So now you have what we have, like what I refer to as like this mini wall of light, right? So there are a lot of benefits to that because light will drop off in a very even way. And if you bring it in quite close, this mini wall of light will drop off very, very quickly. So you can get a lot of kind of shaping and depth with LED panels that were typically very difficult to get with strobes. One of the biggest reasons for that, again, is that strobes need a modifier, right? Compared to an LED panel. So you can bring an LED panel in like 4 inches away from somebody's face, and you don't need to worry about the modifier because it is the modifier. So again, there are lots of things there. So wasn't this like for like journey for me in terms of, okay, cool, now I can just switch to millions of colors as opposed to like 24 colors, which is the gel sheets that you're kind of referring to. It was this kind of relearning of how light works, because it is like foundational learning of the inverse square law is like that's ingrained in us. And I was kind of surprised at how ingrained it was in me. I've been doing this like over 25 years, and you instinctively move a light. I do instinctively move a light, and I know, okay, that's going to drop off like half a stop. Boom, move that back. Cool. That means that the background is now going to be 2 stops darker. Right. This is all happening instinctively in somebody who's been doing it this long. That's no longer happening with LEDs, right? Because that whole principle has changed. So it was very interesting and fascinating for me. It was kind of hungry for something else to learn, and it does allow for new ways of shooting that weren't really possible for the reasons I've just mentioned. So it has been fascinating, but it certainly just hasn't been a case of like, okay, cool, now you've got more colors. No, it certainly wasn't as easy as that.
So you mentioned new ways of shooting. Just give us some examples of what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, one of the ways like new ways of shooting is like I've just mentioned there was being able to bring like a panel. I use the rotolights, which are basically like a 12-inch, it's a circular panel, and it has like a diffusion cover on it already. So typically, what I would use for portraits or even fashion is going to be like a beauty dish as a key light, right? So I'm going to have that key light in nice and close, probably like arms reach away from the model if I'm using a strobe, right? So arms reach away from the model, and it's just out of shot. Maybe I'm shooting underneath it and that sort of thing. Well, what that means with that light being so close is that you're able to see the drop off of light. So like there'll be a different exposure on the nose compared to the ear, right? If we were to have that beauty dish 20 feet away, we wouldn't see a difference in the exposure on the nose to the ear. So this is the inverse square law and light drop off, and this is what gives us 3-dimensional light. This is what gives these images that look of like, wow, they're really coming out of the screen or the page. And this is how we're able to do that, is by bringing in these lights quite close and to have that forced drop off. Now LEDs compounds that even further, right? Because now I don't need to worry about the beauty dish. I don't need to worry about the hotspot that a strobe would create. So like a softbox, or it always creates a hotspot, which should never really use anyway. But that's topic for another day. So this means that the panel I can bring in super close to the model and allows for a very, very sharp drop off of light, which then enables more shadows on the subject that I can then fill with other colors. So that's by far and away like the biggest change for sure. Yeah.
One of the things that I found with LED panels, and the light that's lighting me at the moment is an LED panel. It's basically a big
Same. Yeah.
LED like softbox essentially. Um, the thing I find with those, I mean, there's pros and cons. On the pro side, there's virtually no depth to this light. So as opposed to having like an actual traditional light and then a softbox or something where you need space and
you're talking
it's
about physical depth of the light itself, right?
Yeah, exactly. So from a practicality point of view, I find that amazing because it just gives me a lot more space to work with.
And this is why the LED tubes have become so popular. I mean, it's like lighting with the stabilizers on, right? If you're going to buy light tubes, you can't fail, right? Because they take up no room. They have a very even spread of light and over a larger area, which is great for obviously people portraits. Yeah.
Exactly. And with some of the sort of newer things, like LED mats, for example, which is what my light's based on, there's some really cool things that I've seen recently, like blow up diffusers. I'm like, what is that?
That's right. Yeah, I saw those few years ago. I think it was like originally a German company many years ago. The
Yeah.
tubes, and I mean, it's great for film sets, right? Because you can hoist them
Yeah.
up, and you're not worried about or less worried about wind and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, really useful.
Yeah. And they like, for instance, Godox make them too. They like blow up.
Oh, really? Godox copied some. That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
wild. That's nuts. Godox just that's wow.
I know. And I used some at, where were we? I think we were at the podcast show, and we were at a TikTok event, I think, with Godox, and we used some of their sort of blow up lights. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.